Today we're going to look at a product called IDERA SQL Defrag Manager. Defrag Manager is a great solution for Microsoft SQL Server DBAs for being able to automate policies that will target the most fragmented indexes that reside on the entire enterprise or down to particular Microsoft SQL Server instances, databases, tables, and down to even the individual indexes. To set up a policy to automate the defragmentation of those most fragmented indexes, we need to go up to the top tab that is labeled Automation Policies. Under the Automation Policies tab, we select the button to create a policy, and we just walk through the wizard. I will walk through this wizard to explain what the different settings are. First, on the Main Target tab, you have the ability to select all index types or focus on only clustered or non-clustered indexes. This is where we are going to be doing the actual analysis. So on the right-hand side, we have the ability to select different analysis types. That includes fast, which means that it's going to analyze based on scan density; thorough, which will take into account logical extent fragmentation through a sampling against the indexes; or thorough, more detailed analysis, which will take into account full logical extent fragmentation. On the middle section of this window, we can go through and select very specific objects that we want to target. This can be helpful in environments where you have very large indexes that you do not want it to focus on during the middle of a busy week, for example. If you're looking to limit the time it takes for the analysis to take place and for even the fragmentation afterwards, the defragmentation to take place, then you can go through this little window to target just the indexes that you want. And it allows you to focus on those indexes based on the indexes residing on certain instances or down to certain specific databases, and down to particular tables, and of course down to the particular indexes. And as you can see, you can go through and select or deselect whichever objects that you want it to focus on through that analysis. And now the rest is just fine-tuning the policy. So on the next screen, we have, through the analysis, the threshold settings for it to trigger the actual defrag operation. And so the thresholds can be defined based on the fragmentation levels or scan density or both. If we analyze through fragmentation, then it's going to look at which indexes are heavily fragmented. If we go through scan density, that will look at the actual pages, and if there's very little amounts of data that are stored in each page, then we need to consolidate those pages perhaps for better read performance. And so we can actually have it look at the scan density to look at whether or not we need to do the defrag operation for that consolidation process. Analysis can take some time and be a little more invasive as part of the maintenance process. So we can also have it as part of this regularly reoccurring policy to look at the same analysis results and not actually perform the analysis every time it runs for a period of X number of minutes, hours, or days. Moving to the next screen, we have different filter options. If an index has a small page count, then you can imagine that just with a small amount of data being added or deleted, that fragmentation will spike up. So what we can do is exclude certain indexes that have a smaller page count. Likewise, if we have indexes that have a large number of pages, then it can take a longer amount of time for it to perform the operations against those very large tables with the very large indexes underneath. So you can also exclude a maximum of X number of pages on those indexes. The middle section is for operation order. So when we perform the defrag operations, do we want to target it based on the fragmentation, starting with the highest level of logical extent fragmentation and working down? Or do we want to go with that scan density and work in ascending order? or based on page count, which basically looking at page count will be looking at the size of the index. If there's a lot of pages, then you're going to have a larger index, and so maybe we need to go from descending order with the page count and then work from that perspective. And then on the right hand side we have the qualified indexes filtering. In this case I have it set to target all indexes, but I can also have it target just the top X number of qualified indexes or top percentage of qualified indexes, allowing this policy to run on a night-by-night basis and basically biting off the top X number of qualified indexes or top X percentage of qualified indexes. So it's biting off what it can choose, so to speak, on a night-by-night basis. And then, of course, tomorrow night, if the policy runs again, then it will once again target the top X number of qualified indexes or top X percentage of qualified indexes, which may even include some of the indexes that were targeted the day before. However, again, it's biting off what it can chew on a day-to-day basis and minimizing how long this policy actually runs through the early morning hours. The next screen is the response type. We can either perform a reorg operation or a rebuild online or rebuild sorting in TempDB. It is notable to mention that when you do an online rebuild, there are only certain data types that are supported, and also for certain SQL instances that are of a certain edition, meaning SQL Server Enterprise Edition is all that's supported. And if you look down here at the bottom for online rebuild, certain indexes do not support the online rebuild option. It allows you to perform an offline rebuild for those types of indexes, or perform a reorg instead if you want. And then you could also just fail the online rebuild process for that index and then continue the policy. And that's the same with individual partitions. You can see here SQL Server does not support online rebuild of individual partitions, and so you have different options there as an alternative. There's also the option to update statistics, and you can set it to never update the statistics if you have your other maintenance processes managing that, or perform the statistics update before analysis renewal or before optimization. And you can also select with full scan, or again use sampling based on a percentage or sampling of a particular number of rows as well. On the top right section we have the automate question mark. And so with that, what it's asking is, do you want to go ahead and have it automatically kick off the defrag operation, which I have selected yes. And this is probably the most preferred setting in this little area. But there is also the option here to have it create to-do items, which if you look up to the upper left-hand side of the console, you'll see a little tab that is labeled to-do. What that means is that when it identifies fragmented indexes, it will put them in a list of to-do items where the DBA can come in the morning and go through that list and kick off the defrag operations on their own, manually, one by one, if that's what they want to do. The next screen is the scheduling of this policy, which you can set on specific time intervals, daily frequency on a regular daily basis, certain days of the week, certain times of the day. You can also set execution time periods for restrictions. There's also this option to force executing jobs to stop once the window has passed. If you force the jobs to stop, then it will basically roll back that index that it is working on at that time. If you deselect that, it will complete whatever it's working on and then stop afterwards. And you can also have it enable rediscovery of different objects, because there are some situations where new tables may be getting created. And new additional indexes obviously associated to those tables. So if you want, you can have it rerun the discovery process for those objects. On the next screen we have the resource check, which will allow us, based on certain criteria, to postpone the operation. For example, if a certain number of active sessions are running on that instance, maybe there's some various workload going on, different users interacting with the SQL instance. And for that, we may not want it to perform an offline rebuild where that data becomes inaccessible, or we may not want to interfere with other operations because sometimes the defrag operation can be a little more invasive. So we could select the active session count, and if the active session count is above a specific value or equal to a specific value, or you can even go with a less than a specific value, then postpone the operation. Or based on CPU load percentage for the SQL instance or the total server, or based on memory usage or executing jobs that are running, users logged in count, active transaction count, or transaction log usage percentage as well. And notice at the bottom it also has the option to cancel the policy if the resource check delays execution over X number of minutes, hours, or days. Meaning if this automated policy is running for X number of days and every time it executes it's postponing the operation based on the criteria above, there may be a point where we just want it to stop trying anymore, and we will come back and revisit that policy and perhaps make some adjustments to the policy. Next, we have alerts around this policy. The alerts can be anything from when the policy starts to when policy is complete, policy time expires, if the policy gets enabled or disabled when it completes or has not been successful in X number of days based on that postponement that I just spoke of on the previous tab. And down at the bottom you have the ability to send email alerts to default email recipients, and you can configure that, or send email alerts to the following, a specific distribution list or specific users as well. There's also an option to write these different alerts to the application event log in case you want these events scraped up into a centralized system of monitoring or a SIM solution for that example. Next, we have the summary settings where we put in a name for the policy, and it could be my daily policy, for example, or whatever you want to name it. Some name to indicate what this policy is doing for you with the description information. You can enable the policy and then set the severity level ranking to warning or critical, meaning we're just giving it a color status for whenever this policy runs, how important or how relevant it is when it does run. And then we select finish on that policy. Once we select finish, the policy, depending on whether you enabled it or not, will have a green or red indicator on it. Green indicating that it is enabled. Notice that with whatever policy you select down at the bottom, it does have a summary view of everything that you had selected when you configured that policy. So the next step is to just sit back and let it do its job. You can always go to the Recent Activities tab to look at the history of that policy execution and what it actually targeted, what the fragmentation levels look like, and what the fragmentation change was from after the policy executed as well. There are also a series of reports that are available for reporting on the top 10 fragmented clustered indexes, for example, or the top 10 largest databases, or the top 10 largest tables, and of course with any of these reports there are different parameter options that are available. So for example, with top 10 fragmented clustered indexes, you can select a minimum page count as well, like we saw within the automation policy options. That is how you set up an automation policy in IDERA SQL Defrag Manager. If you have not downloaded and used this product, feel free to go to the IDERA website at www.idera.com. In the product drop-down area, you will see the product called IDERA SQL Defrag Manager, which you can start a free trial. It will prompt you to enter some basic information about yourself, and then it will present you with the software for download, which it comes with a trial key embedded in the software, so you can start working with the tool and hit the ground running with targeting up to 15 instances for 14 days with the trial software. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to IDERA Software. We will get one of the pre-sales engineer team members on the call to answer any technical questions that you may have. Keep your eyes peeled for additional videos that will come in the near future as well. Thank you.